All right. So when we're talking about pressure, what we were talking about is force applied to an area, right? So if I'm here and I want to apply pressure to any part of his body, it means there must be contact, like some area of his must be covered, and I must be applying some form of force, right? This is amplified by the amount of area that it takes up. So we can see, we do the same thing with less space, therefore same amount of force, less space, right? More space, same amount of force, right? Less space, increased pressure, correct?
Yeah.
Now, the same principle applies to more and more the slower you get. This is why things like doing things like that, or passing on your elbow, right? See how I took my pressure off of it because I don't want to hurt him, but this is a way to increase pressure by putting things like our elbows in, because it's a smaller space with a more direct force into one specific area. That is the definition of what pressure is. Force to an area. It's literally divided by itself. Make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Cool. All right. With that principle, like in mind, we know that like this, my force is very little, right, to the amount of area I'm covering, right? My chest is chest. My ability to apply pressure is lessened. But as soon as I take something like my shoulder, right, my ability to now pin him slash put pressure is increased, correct?
Yeah.
The reason I put you in guard is because if it ever becomes too uncomfortable, just press me away.
Yeah.
Okay. Is that tracking?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I want you basically just to get a partner and find an area where you can like take something and then apply the same amount of weight slash force, right, to a smaller area. Smaller area. Smaller area. Okay? Let's do it.
My sternum.
But today is also about learning how to pass like an old man.
Yes,
Act like you have a bad back. Everything you do today should be very slow and almost like meditation. You should feel everything that you're doing today. Right? So like we'll just do it again.
Yeah.
Right? Let's say I want to get past his legs. Right? And I'm here. And I'm like, I want to put pressure down. I want to be able to control his body. And I'm like, something so simple as this. See how my weight is now down. Right? I'm now driving across. Right? Passing super slow. Right? At any of that point, did you feel like you were strong enough to fight me out of that?
I don't know. When you started squishing my nuts, I was pretty.
Fair
ready
enough.
to fight you out.
Usually he said I was pretty ready.
I was pretty ready to get strong enough.
Does that make sense? Okay. Now we're gonna do this example from psych, so you guys can see it. Right. Okay. Okay. So we just talked about how surface area, right, determines how much force we're driving down. A lot of people think, oh, I've got all my weight on him. I have the max amount of force slash pressure I can cause because my weight is here. And even if I take all that weight and I reduce the surface area, people think that they're like, oh, that's the max amount that you have. They are wrong, right? We can apply force, driving force into these things, right? If I was here and I take my feet and I drive into him, I'm increasing the amount of force that I'm pressing. Can you visibly see what happens when I push? You see how his body moves, right? The same thing is happening when I take my chest and I drive forward, right? That's why when you see people, when they take side control and you see them do this, that's what they're doing, right? They'll oftentimes stop it on this side and they drive like this. Does that make sense? Right? That's one form of increasing pressure. Now, this happens literally all over the place, right? Say I was in his guard. Boom. Right? Take my hands and we do this, and then people drive, right? Pelvic thrust or any of that kind of stuff. See how he's scooting forward, right? We'll make it a little less gay, right? But you see how his shoulders are driving forward every time they press forward, right? Now that his shoulders are like caught, like here, see how he starts to compress because the amount of force slash area I'm pressing into, pressure is increased. Does that make sense? Now, from this concept, move around, work. Does that make sense?
Think of it this way, when you're kneading dough, you don't just come straight up and put your body weight on it, right?
Yeah.
You push, use the friction of the table to help increase pressure and get it all mixed up. Knead the dough.
Alright, you do.
Okay.
Yeah,
insert.
it's like,
Yeah,
these
now
are
it's
perfect.
spring,
Like
yeah.
these are the imagery is just perfect. You know? Like I don't.
Okay, so we just described that we can hold someone and we can drive, right? Another form, and you'll see it probably the most common, and this is one of Aki's favorite positions, is from Kesa, right? But we're just gonna show it from right here so you guys can see it, right? What am I doing right here? I'm pulling him, right? So assuming that I'm doing all the things, right? Driving down, right? I've made it a smaller area versus a bigger area, right? And then I pull him towards me. I'm increasing the pressure that I'm doing through a pull motion. Does that make sense? So this pull applies here, most commonly seen in knee and belly, right? If I was here doing that same thing, this is me pulling, increasing pressure. Does that make sense? I'm gonna pull while I drive in, right? Increasing the pressure. Right? All of these things, in any form or fashion, wherever you're at, let's say we're even on the back. Right? I'm going to pull my feet, right? Why? So I can drive my hips. That pull, right? The ability to cinch or squeeze, whatever you want to call it, right, is going to increase your ability to apply force, right? So think of it like an orange, right, or an egg. If you're going to squeeze it and not puncture it, right, you have to put pressure around all sides, right? If I'm trying to puncture it, I only have to put pressure on one point, right? I was like, ooh, I drove. Right, that's a lot of pressure in one spot, right? I'm trying to puncture it. I have no control, right? That's what like hitting is, like boom, I'm putting force, I'm trying to puncture something. If you're trying to control something, right, you're trying to squeeze it around. Does that make sense? The floor luckily helps you. It's controlling one of the planes, right? So utilize that, but another form or fashion of this is what I would call like body lock casting, right? If I got underneath him and I start to squeeze, right, I'm now squeezing the fruit. Does that make sense? I'm going to pull him towards me as I apply pressure, right? And you see I'm trying to escape my hips, keeping control, squeezing, pulling him towards me, driving my shoulder into. Does that make sense? Coo. Give it a try.
So, guard. So this is one that it is all about the right pressure and going slow, right? So this is scarf where you just ignore the guard. So if you can, as you're pressuring in, you find yourself getting whether it's this way or this way, just grab it, move them to the side, and now your pressure is here. And now, same thing, you're just gonna circle. If he wants to hold on to it, it doesn't fucking matter. I'm just gonna keep circling and circling, holding the pressure, right? This pressure and control. And eventually as you get up, he's gonna get tired and just go, you don't like that, huh? He will give it up because it fucking sucks. But, right, you have that control. You start off right away with all the weight. I try to pin right above the pec. So that way I have a good pivot point. Pressure, and then slow circle around, compressing and bending that spring. And so eventually they're gonna go, the spring goes back that way. So classic ignore the guard. Works even better from half, or from half guard, because then you're like already halfway there. Normally, right? But yeah, just boop. Pressure, circle. So it's not always, right? It doesn't always have to be a chest to chest or a side bending in. Pressure, rotate, control. Pressure, I should probably say control, pressure, rotate.
I think they're all fine. No
Okay.
matter what order you do it in, as long as you're doing the things.
Yeah.
Because they don't always happen in that order. Y'all ready for the next
Give
one?
that to Kelly, and it'll be great.
You have a scarf somewhere?
Who
Yeah,
does
so
it?
you've got to punish him.
Yeah.
Scarf doesn't exist.
I can't
It's not
punish
real,
this
it
guy
can't hurt
for
me.
it.
Is that?
Scarf isn't real, it doesn't exist, it can't hurt me.
Okay.
Okay. Sure, keep believing.
That's what I keep saying, telling to Kelly every time I put it in. I'm like, it's not real, it doesn't exist.
Alright, can I see you again?
Yeah, we want.
Side control. Alright, so we've already covered the fact that we can pull and the fact that we can drive, right? So another thing that we were talking about is angle, but I want you to also think about how he just talked about having a pivot point or where we drive our pressure, right? If I drive all my pressure down to his chest, right? This is nothing, right? He can literally move anywhere he wants, right? Not only because he's, bigger than me, right? But because this position's fucking stupid, right? But if I did something a little different, right? And I drove all of my pressure, right? Like this, right? Now I know for sure that I have more control or limiting the ability on this. And this is now either the pivot point, if I can keep it pinned. That's always an if, because some people are very good, right? But like saying I'm driving my pressure here just for pressure's sake, right? He has to now use that as a pivot point, right? Because it's all off of this. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Right? So when we're driving and pinning things, we're doing it with a specific purpose in mind, right? We're either bettering our position, right? Causing misalignment to make it to where they can't attack us, aka like you're in an arm bar. What do? You put a lot of pressure down so they can't break your elbow, right? We stack them up onto their shoulders, right? We pick one shoulder in specific that we drive a lot of pressure in. He goes for an arm bar, right? And I'm here. If I don't choose and I just go halfway, right, my arm's still gonna get broken. If I choose one side, that was so easy for me to choose, and the pressure really didn't change that much. I wasn't driving so much harder. I literally shifted the force/pressure into a smaller area with focus. Does that make sense? So when we're choosing
And
points,
intent.
yeah, and intent, correct, and intent. We're choosing points, right, that are gonna have the desired effect. So even when I'm like doing the guard passing and everything like that, and I start to do these things, right, and I start putting pressure down, right, my pressure is choosing to be towards his hip, right? Or now, if I was here, you see I'm gonna pass that up, right, and go back to hip pressure. But for a minute, right, I'm actually gonna do this. You see how my weight is now on here, right? I still have the ability to pull back and come back to the hip. So it's perfectly fine to swap points of pinning, right? So if I, like this, right? And I want him to come up or anything of that nature. You see I have no control. And what's he gonna probably do? Probably gonna turn towards me. See, I still had control because shin pinning,
Yeah.
right? Now I can always drive him back down if I wanted to, right? I'm still putting pressure down. Y'all see that? Right? At no point am I ever just gonna be like, we're doing jujitsu. Yeah. We're not, right? Jiu-jitsu is all about being connected. You are going to be using some form of pressure. How you use it and how good you use it, that's up to you, right? Once you learn how to do it. But this goes all about our cross-bodying and everything that we just went over, right? Cross-body, pressuring down, right? Where am I pressuring? Here. Where am I actually trying to control? Here, right? Does that make sense? Sure, I'm putting pressure on this. This is the point that I'm trying to control, the pivot, right? And I can increase that angle of pressure. If I'm just like this, there's very little pressure, right? Don't feel it? There's that little bit of drive, and now it's about angle, right? And I can increase this by pulling, right? There's more pressure when I pull them in, and I start to drive. You see how we can combine those things together? Okay, so when you're doing all this, think about your angle and your point that you're choosing, right? Your point and your angle are really going to determine a whole lot of your success in these matter, right? Because if you drive like this, you're only going to be scooting the weight. If you drive directly down, this force might be able to control something, but it doesn't control it very well, right? And change it and go angular. See how the angle is now diagonal? My pressure is not down, right? Nor is it just sideways. It's angular. Look for angles when you're applying your pressure. You should be driving them at a 45-degree angle like a nail. Not always, but angle as a specific. It should be almost at a 45-degree angle almost all the time. There are definitely going to be times where you're going to change that variant, but if you're past the 30-degree variant, you are now laying flat. And you can drive flat, you're just now moving them. Common example of that, I was trying to pass like this, he walks his shoulders away, you see how my angle's way different, and I'm like drive, right, until I get past that 30-degree variant, right here, I am not driving down, I'm driving that way, right? As soon as I get too high, right, the same thing applies, right? I'm no longer driving at a right angle, I'm now driving this way, right? And this can have an effect. Is it the desired effect or like the optimal effect? No, right? You change that angle just a little bit, it'll be better. Does that make sense? And then always pick your point. Give it a try. Thank you.